Chapter 8. You're joking, right? I didn't know about any of this before you told me, Jack said as he sat heavily on a couch. My mom knew that my power had been unlocked yesterday morning. That is when she explained some of her history to me. There is still a lot I don't know, he paused regrettably. Really, I don't know anything. I found out she was a magic user like us this morning, but I didn't think it was anything major, Kaitlyn said softly as she sat on the couch across from Jack. Why didn't you tell me we moved here illegally? I know we moved because of me, but why would we do this? Honey, you have got to stop saying that we moved because of you, her father told her firmly. But we did, it's because… Her eyes flickered over to Jack, and she abruptly stopped speaking and withdrew back into herself. John ran his hand over his face, taking the time to massage his closed eyes with his fingers. Kids are cruel and malicious creatures, he said in a soft and sad rasp. Jack felt his eyes fix on Kaitlyn at the exchange, watching the various emotions flicker across her face. To answer your question, it's because that is what your mother wanted. She wanted us to fly under the radar, to get away from everything. She thought this would be the perfect area. It's been quiet for years, and there are very few users in the area. John smirked as he spoke. I guess now we know why. His chin tilted to point at Jack. I don't really understand what this talk of territories and needing permission is all about, Jack said, speaking up. I understand that my mom is in charge of this territory, but other than that, none of what you have been saying makes any sense. John scratched at the light dusting of stubble on his chin before answering. Think of it in terms of how kingdoms used to work. You had the king, and then directly beneath him you had dukes, viscounts, etc. The duke is in charge of numerous areas, while a baron is in charge of a single area. The baron is responsible for the upkeep and well-being of their holding. As such, anytime someone of power moves into an area that is under a baron's supervision, they are required to announce themselves. In this example, your mother is the baron. This section of Colorado is her territory, and we are the people of power that should have announced ourselves on our arrival. Jack sat up straighter on the comfortable couch. Okay, so far it makes sense. I still have questions like how my mother came to be in charge of the area, but we can get back to that. More importantly, why didn't you or your wife want to announce yourselves when you moved here? That would be because of me, Kaitlyn said somewhat timidly. I just told you. Do not say any more, Chantel said loudly from the now open doorway of the room. None of them had noticed that the yelling had stopped. Jack's mother, Eleanor, was standing behind her with a harsh, unhappy expression on her face and fisted hands on her hips. Jack, we are leaving now, Eleanor said imperiously. I will not have your training conducted by this. She seemed at a loss for words. This venomous viper of a woman. Jack was slow to respond in the wake of his mother's anger. He had never seen her so mad before at one person. Eleanor spun on her heel and stalked away when she saw him stand and begin walking towards her. Bye, I guess. I'll see you tomorrow at school, Jack whispered to Kaitlyn as he walked by. Chantel stood in the doorway, blocking his way as she glared at him with pinched, angry eyes. Her blonde hair was ruffled and looked like she had been pulling at it angrily. She met his gaze, letting her flashing eyes bore into his. I don't know what you and your mother are up to, but I don't like it. Her mouth barely moved as she whispered harshly at him, before moving to the side and allowing him to pass. Jack said nothing as he brushed past her and joined his mother. She was quiet as she started up her car and backed down the driveway. I picked up your bike earlier. It seems you'll be needing it tomorrow morning, she finally ground out angrily. Mom, Jack began tentatively. What happened between you and Kaitlyn's mom? Eleanor breathed in sharply and held it for a few seconds before releasing it. Her hands were tight on the steering wheel. Let's just say that we have a history, and leave it at that. First, I need to talk to your father, and then I need to decide if I am going to report them. Don't, Jack said suddenly. I still don't really understand what they did wrong, but from what they told me, they did it for Kaitlyn. If you report them, it will negatively affect her. I still feel like I owe her for saving my life. Jack could hear his mother grinding her teeth as she processed his words. If you owe her, then I guess I owe Chantel for healing you as well. Fine, I won't report them, but that doesn't mean I'm happy with whatever they are doing here. Thanks, Mom, I appreciate it, Jack told her, giving her a shoulder squeeze. This does complicate things though. I can't train both you and your sister at the same time. The two of you will need completely different styles of training, she said in exasperation. Speaking of Penelope, why didn't you want me to mention her to them? I get the feeling that she isn't exactly normal either. Is she? Jack asked as they pulled into the driveway of their house. Eleanor was quiet as she exited the car and waited for her son to stand next to her. No, she isn't, but remember to be careful what you talk about when you aren't at home. Jack looked around before they entered the house. Do you really think people are listening to us? No, I don't, not yet anyway. The information about you is still too new, but I want you to start being careful now so that it isn't an issue when it really matters. Jack closed the front door and leaned against it. What about Penelope? Is there anything I can do to help her? Eleanor sighed sadly as she turned and looked at her son. You can stay away from her for now. Her hair still hasn't changed back. Thankfully, her eyes have stopped glowing, but next time they might not. You being near her is what is causing these changes in her. Until she has some control over her powers, I think it would be best if you didn't spend too much time with her. Jack's face fell at her words. Mom, she's my sister, she's my friend, and we live in the same house, we eat at the same table. How do you expect me to not spend time with her? Eleanor stepped forward and hugged her son tightly. I don't know, honey. That's just one of the many things I need to discuss with your father when he gets home tonight. I understand. I think I'm going to go to my room and take a nap, Jack said as he lightly pushed his mother away and hurried to his room. He needed to talk to Kaitlyn. Maybe she could help him regardless of her mother. Everything had become so complicated over the last couple of days. Jack knew it wasn't really her fault, but he needed to blame someone right now. Getting her to help him was key right now, and if she felt like it was her fault, then that would make it that much easier to convince her. Jack closed the door to his room and dropped his backpack on his bed, then hurrying over to his window, he opened it and climbed out. His bike was leaning against the side of the garage where his mother had left it after fetching it for him earlier. He had some time before anyone would know he was missing. Penelope usually barged into his room after she got home from school, wanting his help with her homework or just to hang out and play. She had something going on after school this week though, and he was fairly sure his mother would stop her from seeing him anyway. The wheels of his mountain bike sped over the sun-warmed pavement. The air was clear, and the sun was only just starting its descent. The strain on his muscles felt good after sitting in school all day, and the exercise was helping to clear his mind. Jack swung his bike off the road and onto a dirt path. His breath came in short gasps that forced all extra thought from his mind. The small shocks on the mountain bike depressed and extended over the rough terrain. The frustration he had been feeling slowly ebbed away, leaving his mind clear and his emotions stable. Jack firmed his grip on his handlebars and jumped the bike from the dirt path and back onto the paved road. The road he needed to turn on to get to Kaitlyn's house was directly ahead of him. He skidded to a stop before he could turn onto her street, the wheels on his bike locking up under the pressure of his brakes. Kaitlyn was walking away from her house towards him. Her head was down, and she had her hands shoved into the pockets of her fleece jacket. Her long hair was bound into a ponytail that draped down her back. She seemed angry with each step she took, looking like she wanted to kick something. Kaitlyn, Jack called out as she neared him without having looked up. The smile she gave him when she saw who had called her was tremulous at best. What are you doing here? I thought your mom took you home. She did, but I needed to talk to you, so I came back, Jack informed her as he pulled the bike alongside her and started walking with her. Why do you seem so angry right now? Kaitlyn looked at him like he was an idiot. Why do you think? My mom laid down the law after the two of you left. I am not to speak with or see you again. She was going to try to pull me out of school, but Dad stopped her from doing that thankfully. He told her that it would look suspicious and would draw unwanted attention. Also, apparently your mom, and by extension you, are the spawn of the devil who only lives to cause her grief. Jack stopped walking and leaned on the bike as he began laughing. Do you have any idea what their deal is? My mom wouldn't tell me anything more than that they have a history. Kaitlyn stepped off the sidewalk and onto the grass before flopping to the ground and looking at the sky. I have absolutely no idea. Mom doesn't talk about the past all that often. I wouldn't even be surprised if my dad doesn't know either. Nothing? You don't know if they went to school together, or if they picked on each other. Not even if they were bitter rivals or something? Jack asked, sinking to the ground beside her. Nope, nothing. All I know is that something happened in my mom's past that she's ashamed of, and it's related to her parents, my grandparents. It was hard to miss the disdain with which she spoke those familial words. Everything, before she married my dad, is just a blank. She rarely talks about it. Don't get me wrong, she's a great mother and I love her. I just don't know anything about her past. Kaitlyn's eyes were closed as she spoke. Weird. Jack let the matter drop and looked up at the orange-streaked sky. Are you going to be able to help me still, or is that no longer an option? Kaitlyn's ponytail lay on the grass next to her head as she turned to look at him. Why can't your mom train you? Promise not to say anything to your mom or anyone else, he said, twisting his head to look her in the eye. Her eyes narrowed as she blinked at him. If it's something about your family, I can keep it to myself. Jack held his breath as she answered, trying to decide if he really wanted to go against what his mother had said. She needs to focus on my younger sister. I can't be around her right now. Releasing my power or whatever is affecting her as well. My mom told me to keep it a secret, but I need help. I'm not going to lie to you, Jack. I'm not really qualified to train you by myself. I was going to help, but my parents were going to be in charge, especially in the beginning. She took a deep breath and looked back up at the slowly darkening sky. That said, I do have some idea on what we would need to do. If you want, then we could start tomorrow, either right after school or later in the night. We could meet up at the abandoned school building, without anyone being the wiser. That should work fine. Jack stood and brushed off the back of his jeans. I guess I'll see you at school tomorrow. Have a good night. Kaitlyn sat up as he straddled his bike. No, I'll still come to pick you up tomorrow morning. It's my mom that has the issue with training. If I can talk to your mom, she may be able to give me some ideas for the training. Jack smiled weakly at her. Sounds good. I'll see you in the morning then. Dinner was a quiet and strained affair that night. Jack hadn't had a chance to talk to his mother again since he got back from his bike ride. He also hadn't had a chance to talk to Penelope. The red in her hair was still there and had settled into streaks, but her eyes had settled down into a soft caramel color. The table was quiet, with each person lost in their own separate thoughts. Jack pushed back from the table and picked up his dishes and stuck in the sink as he walked past. Mom, I need to talk to you when you're done. Eleanor nodded in acknowledgement, before returning to her plate of food. Jack was sitting at the desk in his room finishing the last of his homework when his mother walked in. What do you need, Jack? She asked as she sat on the edge of his bed. He turned to look at her. I spoke with Kaitlyn earlier, and she is still willing to train me regardless of what her mother wants. She is going to pick me up in the morning for school, and she wanted to talk to you then. She needs to know the best way to train me. She said she has some ideas, but isn't sure of the best way to go about it. His mother took in a deep breath as he spoke, looking like she might interrupt him. I'll speak to her in the morning. I have some questions that she needs to answer first. When I spoke to her this morning, she seemed like a nice girl, but I only spoke to her for a couple of minutes. I'll need to lay down some ground rules and make sure she understands that her mother is not to be involved in any way without speaking with me first. Jack's eyes narrowed in speculation. That was a lot easier than I thought it would be. Why? What are you thinking? Eleanor gave a short bark of laughter. Hasn't anyone ever told you not to ask stupid questions when you get what you want? Her tone gentled as she continued. Look, I know how much being around Penelope means to you. I also know that I can't train and teach both of you at the same time. Allowing Kaitlyn, and possibly her family to help, is really the only option. Is the training going to be hard? For you? Not really. It is more a matter of getting you used to the feel of magic and being able to control it on your end. It will be mentally exhausting, but that is really it. If you are able to use magic once you bond, then it gets truly difficult. Magic for people in a bond changes and becomes different. It becomes more powerful, more innate, more everything. Control is everything for people in that type of bond, so you need to learn as much control as you can now. Why, there's no guarantee that I'll be able to use magic when I bond with her. In his mind, Kaitlyn was still the person he was going to bond with. The thought had gotten under his skin in a significant way in the last few days. His mother smiled somewhat sadly as she stood and faced him. You will need control to be around your sister. As for the matter of you being able to use magic once you have bonded, there is no doubt in my mind that you will be able to, especially if you bond with her. Don't forget, I know her mother. What does that mean? What does her mother have to do with this? Jack asked as his mother walked away. She paused next to his door. I'll talk to Kaitlyn in the morning. Get your rest now. You're going to need it.